The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a metal ocean under the artificial stars of Nexus Prime. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy sat in curved rows that spiraled up toward the domed ceiling. Their forms were as different as planets themselves. Some walked on legs, others floated in energy fields, and a few existed as pure light contained in crystal shells. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the speaker's platform in the center of it all. She was small compared to most of the aliens around her, but she held herself straight and steady. Her dark hair was pulled back in the regulation style of Earth's new stellar navy. The blue and silver uniform looked simple next to the elaborate robes and armor worn by representatives from older civilizations. The topic of today's session made every being in the hall nervous. For 3 years, ships had been disappearing in the void sectors. Not just 1 or 2 vessels, but entire fleets. Whole colonies had gone silent. When scout ships went to investigate, they found nothing. Not wreckage, not energy signatures, not even the basic radiation that dead planets usually left behind. Just empty space where civilizations used to be. High Counselor Zelthera called the session to order. Her voice came through translation devices as a musical tone that somehow carried the weight of authority. She was one of the Etherians, beings of pure energy who had watched the galaxy turn for millions of years. "We gather to discuss the Void Sector crisis," Zelthera announced. 17 civilizations have vanished in the past 3 years. Our greatest minds have studied the problem. Today, we will hear their conclusions. The first to speak was Prime Calculator Hexnath of the Zephyrians. His crystalline body caught the light and scattered it in mathematical patterns as he moved to the platform. The Zephyrians had built the first computers in this part of the galaxy. Their minds worked like living machines, processing information at speeds that made other species dizzy. "The data is clear," Hexnath said. His words came out in precise, measured tones. "We have run 1 million simulations using every known variable. The probability of mission success is 0.3%. The probability of total fleet loss is 99.7%. Attempting to investigate the void sectors would be mathematical suicide." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. The Zephyrians were never wrong about numbers. If they said something was impossible, it usually was. Next came War Marshal Krathek of the Krathon Empire. He was massive even by Krathon standards, his shell-like armor scarred from 1,000 battles. The Krathons had conquered half the galaxy before deciding that ruling it was too much work. They knew warfare like humans knew breathing. "I have commanded fleets for 600 years, Krathek rumbled. "I have fought in nebulas where matter itself was weaponized. I have led charges against creatures that ate starlight. But the void sectors..." He paused, his forearms spreading in a gesture of defeat. "There is no enemy to fight. No strategy works against nothing. We would send our finest warriors into empty space and they would simply stop being." The Etherian representative floated forward next. Ancient beyond measure, she had seen species rise from primitive worlds to galactic powers, then fade into memory. Her voice carried the sadness of someone who had witnessed too much history. "Young ones," she said, addressing the entire hall despite being older than most of their civilizations. "I have felt the edges of that darkness. It does not kill in the way you understand death. It removes. It makes things unbe. The void does not destroy. It denies existence itself." Captain Chen listened to each speaker with growing frustration. She had read every report, studied every piece of data they had. The humans had their own theories about what might be happening in the void sectors, but theory didn't matter if nobody was willing to test it. When the formal presentations ended, Zelthara opened the floor for discussion. Chen raised her hand immediately. "The human delegation requests permission to address the council," she said. A ripple of what could only be called polite laughter went through the assembly. The translation devices struggled with some of the sounds. Apparently, several species found the idea amusing in ways that didn't translate well into human concepts. Zelthara gestured for Chen to proceed. The Etherian's energy form flickered with what might have been curiosity. Chen walked to the platform with steady steps. She had practiced this speech during the 3-month journey to Nexus Prime. She knew she would only get one chance. "Earth's Stellar Navy volunteers for the Void Sector mission," she said simply. The laughter became louder. Prime Calculator Hexnath's crystal form actually brightened with what the humans had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of amusement. "Captain Chen," Hexnath said, "your species achieved faster-than-light travel only 37 years ago. You have established colonies on 12 worlds. The Crethon Empire spans 4,000 systems. The Zephyrian Federation encompasses entire galactic arms. What makes you think humans could succeed where we would fail?" Chen had expected this question. "Because we don't know enough to be afraid." War Marshal Krathek's laughter boomed across the hall. "Ignorance is not a military advantage, young human. It is a path to glorious death at best." "Maybe," Chen said, "but every report I've read about the void sectors assumes we understand what we're dealing with. Your simulations are based on known physics. Your tactics assume conventional enemies. Your wisdom comes from millions of years of experience. But what if that experience is exactly the problem?" The hall grew quieter. Some of the representatives leaned forward with interest. Chen continued. "Humans have been exploring dangerous places for our entire history. We sailed across oceans when we thought sea monsters would eat us. We climbed mountains that killed most who tried. We went to space when everyone said it was impossible. We're not brave because we're fearless. We're brave because we're too curious to let fear stop us. Curiosity is not a qualification for survival," the Etherian representative said gently. "Child species, I have watched civilizations like yours burn bright and die young. Your enthusiasm is admirable, but wisdom comes from understanding one's limitations." "With respect," Chen replied, "maybe limitations are just things nobody's figured out how to get around yet." The formal vote began immediately after her speech. Chen knew it was a formality, but she had to watch anyway. One by one, the species representatives cast their votes on the humans' proposal. The Zephyrians voted no. Probability math didn't support human success. The Crethons voted no. Military doctrine advised against sending inexperienced forces into impossible situations. The Etherians voted no. Ancient wisdom warned against allowing young species to attempt missions that had defeated their elders. 37 species voted against humanity's participation in the mission. 0 voted in favor. Zelthara announced the results with formal politeness. "The motion is denied. Humanity's offer is appreciated but declined. The void sector investigation will be postponed until a more viable solution can be found." Chen stood as the other delegates began filing out. Her jaw was set in a way that her crew would have recognized as dangerous. The human delegation gathered around her, 5 officers representing Earth's first attempt at galactic diplomacy. "Captain?" asked Commander Torres, her second in command. "What are our orders?" Chen looked around the emptying hall. She watched ancient species walking away from a problem they considered unsolvable. She thought about 17 civilizations that had simply stopped existing. She thought about the families who would never know what happened to their missing loved ones. "Is that it?" she said quietly. The question wasn't directed at anyone in particular, but her voice carried in the acoustics of the great hall. Several alien delegates turned to look at her. Something in her tone made them pause. Chen met their eyes one by one. "Is that really it? 17 civilizations are gone, and the solution is to give up because the math looks bad?" She turned to her team. "Pack our gear. We're going home." As the humans left the hall, none of the alien representatives noticed the small recording device that Chen left behind, still transmitting everything back to Earth's military command. They also didn't notice that the human ship's departure vector wasn't aimed at Earth. It was aimed at the void sectors. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council's rejection of humanity's proposal. The alien representatives had returned to their homeworlds, confident that they had prevented a young species from making a fatal mistake. The void sectors remained untouched, a dark scar across the galaxy that everyone agreed to avoid. Then the emergency broadcast began. Admiral Zexton of the Crethon Defense Fleet was the first to receive the distress signal. It came from the edge of the void sectors themselves, broadcast on emergency frequencies that hadn't been used in over 1,000 years. "This is Last Call Station calling any Galactic Council ships," the transmission said, in accented galactic standard. "We could really use some backup out here. Also, does anyone know if synthetic coffee causes hallucinations? Asking for several friends, Sexton stared at his communication officer with all four eyes wide. Run a trace on that signal immediately. The results came back within minutes and they made no sense. The transmission was coming from coordinates that should have been empty space. The location was less than a light hour from the void boundary, closer than any ship had dared approach in 3 millennia. Sir, his communications officer said nervously. The signal is definitely human in origin, but according to our records, the human delegation returned to Earth after the council session. Sexton pulled up the tactical display. A small cluster of objects sat in the darkness at the very edge of known space. They were too small to be planets, too large to be ships, and they were definitely artificial. Assemble the emergency response fleet, he ordered. Contact the council immediately. And somebody find out what last call station means in human culture. By the time the combined Galactic Council fleet reached the coordinates, they had gathered representatives from 12 species. What they found waiting for them defied every principle of safe space exploration. The humans had built a space station, not just any station, but a massive construction that bristled with sensor arrays, weapon platforms, and what appeared to be experimental technology that no sane engineer would test near a cosmic anomaly. Dozens of human ships moved around it in patterns that seemed random but somehow avoided colliding with each other. Captain Chen's face appeared on the main view screen as soon as the alien fleet dropped out of hyperspace. She looked exactly the same as she had 3 months ago, except for the coffee stain on her uniform and the dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept properly in weeks. "Oh, you're here," she said cheerfully. "Perfect timing. We were just about to go poke the scary space anomaly with a stick. Want to watch?" Admiral Sexton found himself speechless for the first time in 6 centuries of military service. Behind Chen, he could see human crew members moving around what appeared to be a command center held together with spare parts and determination. "Captain Chen," he managed finally, "what exactly are you doing here?" "Science," she replied, as if that explained everything. "Also engineering. Some military stuff. Oh, and we're pretty sure we figured out why ships keep disappearing." Dr. Marcus Webb appeared on screen next to Chen. He was a thin man with wild gray hair and the kind of excited expression that made other species nervous. He clutched a tablet covered in equations that seemed to hurt to look at directly. "We've sent in 17 different probe types," Webb explained rapidly. "Lost 15 ships of various sizes, but we got some fantastic data before they vanished. We've also interviewed survivors from every recorded void encounter. Turns out 3 species had survivors who made it out but never reported back because nobody believed them." "You've been sending ships into the void?" "Prime calculator." Hexnath's crystal form flickered with alarm. "That is precisely what our calculations said would result in total mission failure." "Well, yes," Webb agreed. "If you send ships in the normal way. But we're not normal, are we? We've been doing this the human way." Chen gestured to something off-screen, and the view screen split to show a tactical display. The humans had mapped the edge of the void in detail that shouldn't have been possible. Energy patterns, gravitational anomalies, and something labeled temporal displacement events were marked throughout the area. "The thing is," Chen continued, "you are all thinking about this as a military problem or a mathematical problem or a wisdom problem, but it's actually an engineering problem." "Engineering?" The Etherian representative's voice carried confusion. "Child, engineering requires understanding the laws of physics. The void appears to operate outside such laws." "That's what makes it interesting," Dr. Webb said. He looked genuinely excited about the prospect of studying something that broke reality. "See, normal space follows rules. The void doesn't. But that doesn't mean it's random. It just means it follows different rules. We've been trying to figure out what those rules are." Commander Torres appeared on screen, her hair singed and her uniform torn. She carried what appeared to be a piece of alien technology that was glowing in colors that didn't exist. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but we've got another temporal echo on sensor grid 7. Also, the thing that Jenny found yesterday is either singing or screaming. Hard to tell which." Chen nodded as if this was perfectly normal information. "Right," added to the log. "Torres, meet Admiral Sexton and the gang. Gang, meet Torres. She's our expert on things that shouldn't exist but do anyway." Sexton's military mind struggled to process what he was seeing. The humans had approached the galaxy's most dangerous mystery, the same way they might approach fixing a broken engine. by taking it apart to see how it worked. "Captain," he said carefully, "how many personnel have you lost in these experiments?" "Lost?" Chen looked confused for a moment. "Oh, you mean killed?" "Nobody, actually. Well, Jenkins got temporarily unstuck in time for about 6 hours, but he came back with some really useful information about causality loops, and Martinez accidentally turned himself partially invisible, but that's been pretty handy for reconnaissance work." "How is any of this possible?" Prime Calculator Hexnath demanded. His mathematical mind was clearly struggling with data that refused to fit into proper equations. Dr. Webb brightened even more if that was possible. "Well, that's the beautiful thing about humans. We don't know enough about what's impossible to let it stop us. Every other species in the galaxy has millions of years of experience telling them what can't be done. We've got about 30,000 years of recorded history, and most of that is us doing things that probably should have killed us. But the calculations," Hexnath began, "are based on assumptions that might be wrong," Webb interrupted. "You assumed the void operates like normal space but more dangerous. We assumed it operates like nothing we've ever seen and started from there. Turns out when you're not limited by preconceived notions about how physics should work, you can discover some very interesting things." The screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at imagery from inside the void itself. The visuals were distorted and strange, but they clearly showed something moving in the darkness. Structures that twisted through dimensions, energy patterns that seemed to think, and in the distance, the impossible sight of ships that should have been destroyed years ago. "Is that—" Admiral Zexton's voice trailed off. "The Krathon heavy cruiser, Eternal Victory," Chen confirmed. "Disappeared 8 months ago with all hands. They're still alive in there, but they're caught in some kind of temporal loop. They've been fighting the same battle over and over again." "That's impossible," Zexton whispered. "Yeah, we thought so too," Chen said. "But then we realized that impossible is just another word for haven't figured it out yet. And humans are really good at figuring things out." She leaned forward, and her expression became serious for the first time since the conversation began. "Admiral, we didn't come out here to prove a point or show off. We came because 17 civilizations full of living beings just vanished, and nobody was willing to even try to help them. Maybe we can't save them. Maybe we'll all get erased from existence trying, but at least we'll know we tried." She paused, then smiled that dangerous human smile that was becoming famous throughout the galaxy. "Besides, somebody has to be the first to figure out how to fix this mess, and apparently that somebody is us." The alien fleet maintained their position at what they considered a safe distance, while the humans continued their work. Over the following days, they watched in fascination and horror as humanity did what humanity did best, turned the impossible into merely extremely dangerous. And deep in the void, ancient things that had been feeding on trapped civilizations for millennia began to take notice of the strange new species that refused to follow the rules. The human fleet entered the void like swimmers diving into an ocean of night. From the safety of their distant position, the alien observers watched their sensors with growing disbelief as human ships navigated through space that seemed to devour light itself. Captain Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's newest and most advanced exploration vessel. Around her, her crew worked with the calm efficiency of people who had spent months preparing for something that should have killed them already. "Status report," she called out. "Navigation is holding steady," Lieutenant Park reported from her station, though steady is a relative term when space-time keeps hiccuping every few minutes. "Sensors are picking up massive energy signatures dead ahead," added Chief Science Officer Webb. He looked even more excited than usual, which the crew had learned to recognize as either a very good sign or a very bad one. "Whatever we're dealing with, it's big. Really big." "Define big," Chen said. "Solar system big. Possibly bigger." "The readings are, well, they're impossible, but we're getting them anyway." Through the main view screen, the crew could see their destination growing larger. The void wasn't actually empty, as they had discovered during their months of preparation. It was full of structures that existed partially outside normal spacetime, creating the illusion of emptiness to sensors that were designed to detect normal matter and energy. "Captain," Communications Officer Reynolds called out, "I'm receiving transmissions from the other ships in the fleet. They're all reporting the same thing. Their instruments are working perfectly, but they're detecting things that can't exist. Welcome to the void." Chen said dryly. Where the impossible is just Tuesday. The first contact with the void entities came without warning. One moment the human fleet was cruising through twisted space, and the next moment they were fighting for their lives against creatures that seemed to be made of living darkness. The entities attacked not with weapons, but with time itself. Human ships suddenly found themselves trapped in temporal loops, fighting the same battle over and over again. The logical response should have been panic, but humans had never been accused of being logical. All ships, this is Chen, the captain broadcast on all frequencies. Don't fight the loops. Analyze them. Every time we repeat, we learn something new. Use it. The Etherian observers watching from their safe distance felt something they hadn't experienced in millions of years. Surprise. The humans weren't trying to break free from the temporal traps. They were studying them. Fascinating, Dr. Webb said as the Defiance lived through the same 3-minute battle sequence for the 7th time. The loop isn't perfect. Each repetition has minor variations. The entities are learning from our responses and adapting. So are we, Chief Gunner Martinez added. She had noticed that the enemy's attack patterns were becoming more predictable with each loop. I think I can hit that big one next time around. Negative on the shooting, Chen ordered. Webb, how do these things think? They don't. Not in any way we'd recognize, Webb replied, his fingers flying over his instruments. They're more like their programs, but programs with the ability to learn and adapt. They trap civilizations in temporal loops to study them, then drain their resources across infinite repetitions. Resources? Everything. Energy, matter, information, even the basic quantum patterns that make up organized thought. They're not just destroying these civilizations, they're consuming every trace that they ever existed. The ship shuddered as it reset to the beginning of the loop again. This was the 10th repetition, and the crew had fallen into a rhythm of observation and analysis that no other species could have maintained. Where orderly minds would have gone insane from the repetition, human unpredictability turned the trap into a learning opportunity. Captain, Navigator Park called out, I think I've figured out how to break the loop. The entities are using our own expectations against us. They predict what we'll do based on logical tactical responses. But what if we don't respond logically? Chen smiled. It was the smile that had become legendary among the alien observer fleet. Define not logical. Well, Park said, instead of fighting or running, what if we sang to them? The bridge went quiet for a moment. Even by human standards, that was an unusual suggestion. Explain, Chen said. The entities are programs designed to learn from military responses. They understand tactics, strategy, fear, and aggression. But they don't understand art or music or any of the weird creative things humans do just because we feel like it. Chief Martinez grinned. Are you suggesting we confuse interdimensional predators to death? I'm suggesting we give them something their programming can't analyze, Park replied. Something so uniquely human that their learning algorithms can't adapt to it. When the loop reset for the 11th time, the human fleet did something that no species in galactic history had ever attempted during a life-or-death battle. They began to broadcast music, not just any music, but a carefully selected playlist that included everything from classical symphonies to death metal to something called experimental noise jazz that most humans couldn't understand either. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as the temporal loops began to destabilize. It's working, Webb reported with amazement. The entities are having some kind of processing error. They're trying to analyze patterns in human art, but there are no logical patterns to find. All ships, this is Chen, the captain broadcast. We're through the first layer, but I'm reading much larger energy signatures ahead. The real challenge is just beginning. As the human fleet pushed deeper into the void, they discovered the truth that had been hidden for thousands of years. The missing civilizations weren't destroyed. They were still there, trapped in elaborate temporal prisons that kept them fighting endless wars against enemies that reset every time they achieved victory. The Krathon cruiser, Eternal Victory, was indeed caught in an eternal battle, just as the humans had detected. But it wasn't alone. Dozens of ships from various species were trapped in similar loops, their crews unaware that they had been fighting the same battle for months or years. Can we break them out? Chen asked. Theoretically, Webb replied, but it would require creating a massive disruption in the local space-time matrix, and we'd have to do it while avoiding getting trapped ourselves. Risks? Total failure of everything we understand about physics. Possible creation of a black hole. Potential unraveling of causality in this entire sector. Oh, and we might accidentally erase ourselves from history. Chen considered this for exactly 3 seconds. Acceptable risks. Begin preparations. The rescue operation that followed became the stuff of legend among species that survived to tell the tale. Human engineers worked with the desperation of people who knew they were attempting the impossible. They jury-rigged technology that shouldn't exist, combining human ingenuity with salvaged alien equipment to create temporal anchor points throughout the void. The breakthrough came when Dr. Webb made a connection that purely logical thinking couldn't achieve. The void entities weren't just predators feeding on trapped civilizations. They were prisoners too, caught in their own feeding mechanism and unable to stop consuming even though the process was slowly destroying them as well. They're stuck in the same kind of loop as their victims, Webb explained to the assembled fleet captains. They feed on temporal energy to maintain their existence, but the feeding process traps them in repetitive behavior patterns. They can't stop because stopping would mean ceasing to exist. So how do we break everyone out? Captain Torres asked from the heavy cruiser Prometheus. We don't break the loops, Webb said. We synchronize them. It was a plan so audacious that it made veteran space explorers dizzy just thinking about it. Instead of trying to destroy the temporal traps, the humans would link all of them together in a single massive resonance pattern. Then they would use the combined energy to create a cascade failure that would shatter the entire void construct like glass. The plan required perfect timing, impossible precision, and the kind of luck that humans specialized in creating through sheer stubborn refusal to accept failure. It worked. When the void collapsed, it did so with a sound that registered on instruments across half the galaxy. Reality snapped back into normal configuration like a rubber band that had been stretched too far. And suddenly the empty space where 17 civilizations had vanished was full of ships again, confused. Transmissions filled every communication channel as species that had been missing for years found themselves free and trying to understand what had happened. The alien observer fleet watched in amazement as the impossible rescue became reality. All ships, this is Captain Chen. The transmission came across all frequencies. Welcome back to normal space-time. You've been missing for a while, but we'll explain everything later. Right now, we need to make sure everyone's okay. Admiral Sexton stared at his tactical display with all 4 eyes wide. The human fleet had not only survived the void, but had brought back dozens of ships that the galaxy had given up for dead. How? He whispered. The answer came from Dr. Webb, whose excited voice carried across the communication channels. We refused to accept that it was impossible. The rescued fleets hung in space like ghost ships returning from the dead. Their hulls bore the scars of battles that had lasted far longer than their crews remembered. And their communication systems crackled with confused voices speaking in dozens of languages. Captain Chen stood in the main communication center of Last Call Station, watching displays that showed more activity than this region of space had seen in thousands of years. Each rescued ship represented a piece of history that everyone had thought was lost forever. Status report on the rescued vessels, she called out. Commander Torres looked up from her console, her face showing the exhaustion of someone who had been working for 3 straight days. We've got 73 ships from 17 different species. The oldest has been missing for over 2,000 years. The newest disappeared just 6 months ago. Casualties? That's the weird part, Torres replied. Almost none. The temporal loops preserved them perfectly. Most crews don't even realize how long they've been gone. They think they've been fighting for a few hours at most. Dr. Webb hurried over, clutching a tablet covered in data that made normal people's eyes water. His hair was even wilder than usual, and he had the manic energy of a scientist who had just discovered something that shouldn't exist. Captain, you need to see this, he said breathlessly. The rescued crews aren't just alive. They've been fighting alongside each other. The temporal loops force different species to work together in ways that never happened before. We've got Krathon warriors taking orders from Etherian tacticians, Zephyrian computers running calculations for organic beings they've never met. Chen studied the data with growing amazement. They've been learning from each other. More than that, Webb continued. They've been evolving. The constant battle pressure and the need to cooperate for survival has pushed every species beyond what they thought they were capable of. Some of the technology combinations they've developed. He paused, shaking his head. It's impossible, but they did it anyway. A new voice cut through the communication chatter. It was deep and resonant, carrying the authority of someone used to commanding respect. This is Fleet Commander Kethvar of the Krathon vessel Eternal Victory. I request immediate communication with whoever is in charge of this rescue operation. Chen walked to the main communication console and activated the view screen. The face that appeared belonged to one of the largest Krathons she had ever seen. His shell armor was scarred beyond belief, and his four eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen impossible things and survived them. This is Captain Sarah Chen, commanding the human rescue fleet. Kethavar's eyes widened slightly. Human? I have never heard of this species. How long have we been away? Your ship disappeared 8 months ago, Chen replied gently. But inside the temporal loops, you've been fighting for much longer. How much do you remember? Everything, Kethvar said, his voice heavy with memory. Every battle, every fallen comrade, every moment of desperation. We fought alongside species we had never seen before, against creatures that existed outside our understanding of reality. And now you tell me it has been only months? Time moved differently inside the void, Dr. Webb explained, appearing beside Chen. From your perspective, you may have experienced years or even decades of combat. But the temporal loops prevented any real time from passing in normal space. More ships began requesting communication. The view screen split to show faces from across the galaxy, beings that represented some of the oldest and most advanced civilizations in known space. All of them looked confused, exhausted, and strangely grateful. This is Thoughtweaver Silandra of the Etherian vessel Luminous Path, came a voice like singing crystal. I must understand, how did you accomplish what we believed impossible? The entities we fought were beyond physical destruction. Chen found herself facing questions she wasn't sure how to answer. How did you explain human stubbornness to beings who had existed for millions of years? How did you describe the refusal to accept limitations to species that had built their entire civilizations on understanding the rules of reality? We cheated, she said finally. The assembled alien commanders looked confused by the translation. I don't understand, Admiral Telnash of the Zephyrian Exploration Fleet said. His crystalline form flickered with processing patterns. How does one cheat against the laws of physics? By ignoring them until they go away, Dr. Webb replied cheerfully. Or by finding new laws that work better. The entities that trapped you were following very specific rules about how temporal loops function. We just followed different rules. Captain Chen activated the tactical display showing the combined rescued fleet. What matters now is what we do next. You've all been officially declared lost by your home governments. Some of your species think you've been dead for years. We need to figure out how to get everyone home safely. There is another matter, Fleet Commander Kethvar said, his voice grave. During our time in the loops, we encountered evidence of more void regions. The entities we fought were not unique to this location. There are others spread throughout the galaxy. A chill went through the communication center. Chen had feared this might be the case, but hearing it confirmed was still unsettling. How many others? She asked. At least 17 similar regions, replied Thoughtweaver Silandra. The entities communicated with each other across vast distances. They were part of a larger network, feeding information and energy to some central source. Dr. Webb's eyes lit up with dangerous enthusiasm. A network? That means there's a pattern we can analyze. If we can understand how they're connected. Webb, Chen said warningly, recognizing that look. Don't even think about it. But Captain, if there are more void regions, that means more trapped civilizations. We can't just ignore them now that we know they exist. We can barely handle the aftermath of this one rescue, Commander Torres pointed out. We've got 73 ships full of people who have been missing for anywhere from months to millennia. Some of their home governments have probably collapsed or evolved beyond recognition. Which is exactly why we need to move fast, Webb argued, before more civilizations disappear. The debate was interrupted by an emergency alert from the sensor stations. Chief Analyst Park's voice carried over the intercom with barely controlled excitement. Captain, you need to see this. We're detecting massive energy signatures from the direction of the galactic core. Something big is moving out there, and it's heading our way. The tactical display shifted to show long-range sensor readings. A cluster of objects was indeed moving through space at impossible speeds, following a direct course toward their position. Analysis? Chen demanded. The energy patterns match what we recorded from the void entities, Park reported. But these are much larger, much more powerful, And they're not hiding in twisted spacetime. They're moving through normal space like they own it. Fleet Commander Kethvar's image on the view screen showed recognition and fear. The central nodes, he said quietly. We encountered references to them during our battles. The individual void regions were just feeding stations. These are the beings they were feeding. How big are we talking about? Chen asked. Big enough to consume star systems, Kethvar replied. The entities we fought were afraid of them. That should tell you something about what we're facing. Dr. Webb was practically bouncing with excitement. This is incredible. We're about to meet the apex predators of interdimensional space. The amount we could learn. Webb, Chen said firmly. I'm promoting you to Chief Science Officer of the Impossible Things Division. Congratulations, now figure out how to kill them. Can we kill them? Commander Torres asked. We destroyed their feeding network, Chen said. That probably made them angry. Angry things make mistakes. Humans are very good at taking advantage of mistakes. She turned to address all the rescued fleet commanders. I know you've all been through hell. I know you want to go home. But right now, you're the only beings in the galaxy who have actual combat experience against these entities. We need your help. The response was immediate and unanimous. Every commander from every species representing civilizations that had rarely agreed on anything throughout galactic history spoke as one. What do you need us to do? Chen smiled. It was the smile that had become famous throughout the galaxy, the one that meant humans were about to do something impossible. We're going to save the galaxy, she said simply. All of it. Every species, every world, every civilization that calls this galaxy home. And we're going to do it by working together. She paused, looking at the faces of beings who had been enemies, strangers, or completely unknown to each other just days before. The entities made one critical mistake when they trapped you all together. They taught you how to cooperate. They showed you what different species can accomplish when they fight side by side. And now you're going to use that knowledge to protect everyone who can't protect themselves. The rescued fleets began to organize themselves with efficiency that surprised everyone involved. Krathon military discipline combined with Etherian tactical wisdom and Zephyrian computational power. Humans provided the unpredictable innovation that held it all together. As the approaching entities grew closer, the combined fleet prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of every living. The combined fleet that emerged from the collapsing void sectors was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 73 rescued ships flying in formation with the human fleet. Their crews working together with a coordination that defied thousands of years of political and cultural differences. At the center of it all, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching tactical displays that showed the approaching threat. The entities from the galactic core had arrived, and they were even more massive than the worst estimates had suggested. Status report, she called. Out. The core entities are maintaining position at the edge of the system, reported Chief Science Officer Webb. His excitement had been replaced by focused concentration. They're not attacking yet. I think they're studying us. Good, Chen said. Let them study. We're studying them right back. The main view screen showed the assembled alien fleet commanders. Over the past week, these beings had gone from confused survivors to a unified fighting force. The experience of being trapped together in temporal combat had forged bonds that normally took centuries to develop. Fleet status report, Chen requested. Fleet Commander Kethvar of the Krathons spoke first. All Krathon vessels are combat ready. Our weapons have been enhanced with Zephyrian targeting systems and Etherian energy modulation. We are prepared for battle. Zephyrian computational arrays are running at maximum efficiency, added Admiral Telnash. We have calculated 17,000 different attack scenarios and identified the optimal response patterns for each, Thoughtweaver Silandra's crystalline voice carried across the communication channels. Etherian vessels have extended our energy networks throughout the entire fleet. We can share power, shields, and consciousness coordination as needed. Chen nodded with satisfaction. And the human ships? Commander Torres grinned from her position on the Prometheus, ready to improvise wildly and see what happens. Perfect, Chen said. Dr. Webb, what are we dealing with? Webb activated the tactical analysis display. The core entities are massive. Each one is roughly the size of a small moon. They exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions we can't even detect. They're the ones who created the void networks to harvest civilizations for them. Weaknesses: They're old, Webb replied. Really old. Possibly older than most of the civilizations in the galaxy. They've been feeding on trapped species for so long that they've become dependent on that specific type of energy. Without their feeding network, they're starting to weaken. How long do we have before they adapt? Unknown, but not long. They're already trying to recreate the void network using their own energy reserves. If they succeed, they'll be able to trap entire star systems instead of just individual ships. Captain Chen studied the tactical display. The core entities weren't just mindless predators. They were ancient beings with intelligence that spanned eons. They had watched civilizations rise and fall, had fed on the greatest empires in galactic history. The very fact that they were here, in person instead of hiding behind their void networks, meant they considered the combined fleet a serious threat. All fleet commanders, Chen announced, prepare to receive tactical data. We're going to try something that's never been attempted in the history of galactic warfare. The plan that Dr. Webb and his team had developed was audacious, even by human standards. Instead of trying to fight the entities directly, they would use the same technique that had collapsed the void network: synchronization and resonance cascade. The entities maintain their existence through complex energy patterns. Webb explained to the assembled commanders. They're like living songs made of space-time itself. If we can create interference patterns in their harmonic frequencies, we can disrupt their cohesion. You want to sing them to death? Fleet Commander Kethvar asked. Even through the translation system, his tone carried disbelief. We want to make them tone-deaf, Chen corrected. Every ship in the fleet will broadcast carefully calculated energy patterns. The combination of all our different technologies, Krathon military power, Zephyrian computational precision, Etherian energy manipulation, and human unpredictability, should create an interference pattern they can't adapt to. And if it doesn't work? Admiral Telnash inquired. Then we improvise, Chen said simply. The battle began when the core entities finally lost patience with observation and launched their attack. Reality twisted around the combined fleet as the ancient beings tried to trap them in the same kind of temporal loops that had enslaved other civilizations. But the rescue fleet was prepared. Every crew had experience fighting in twisted spacetime. They knew how to maintain formation when causality stopped making sense, how to communicate when time was flowing in circles, and most importantly, how to trust each other when everything else became unreliable. All ships, begin harmonic bombardment, Chen ordered. The combined fleet opened fire with weapons that had never been designed to work together. Krathon particle beams enhanced with Zephyrian targeting computers, Etherian energy lances guided by human intuition, and completely improvised combinations that shouldn't have been possible. The energy patterns created by the bombardment began to interfere with the entity's existence frequencies. The ancient beings who had fed on civilizations for millions of years found themselves facing something they had never encountered before, a truly unified response from multiple species. It's working, Webb reported with excitement. Their cohesion patterns are destabilizing. They can't adapt fast enough to counter all our different energy signatures simultaneously. But the entities weren't helpless. As their existence began to unravel, they launched a desperate counterattack. Space itself began to tear around the fleet, creating wounds in reality that bled darkness and possibility. Hull breach on Deck 7, someone reported from the Defiance. But the breach is temporal? The wall is there and not there at the same time. All ships maintain formation, Chen commanded. Don't let them separate us. Unity is our only advantage. The battle raged across dimensions that didn't have names. Ships fought enemies that existed in the spaces between seconds. Crews held their positions while reality rewrote itself around them. And through it all, the combined fleet held together with bonds forged in the crucible of the void. The turning point came when one of the core entities made a crucial mistake. Desperate to escape the harmonic bombardment, it tried to phase completely into normal space-time. The moment it became fully material, every ship in the fleet targeted it with conventional weapons. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The death of the first entity sent shockwaves through the remaining creatures. Their perfect coordination, maintained for millions of years, began to break down. They started making individual decisions instead of acting as a collective, and individual decisions led to individual mistakes. The battle ended with a whimper rather than a bang. The surviving entities, reduced from dozens to just a few, simply left. They folded themselves into dimensions beyond detection and fled to whatever corner of the universe ancient predators went to die. All ships, cease fire, Chen ordered. Damage reports. The reports came in from across the fleet. Damaged ships, exhausted crews, but no total losses. Somehow, impossibly, they had faced beings that had devoured civilizations and lived to tell about it. "Captain," Dr. Webb said quietly, "we need to talk about what comes next." Chen looked at him with tired eyes. "What do you mean?" "The galaxy has 17 more void regions that we know about, and probably others we haven't detected yet. There are trapped civilizations out there right now, fighting endless battles just like these crews were, and there might be more core entities lurking in deep space." Chen sighed. She had known this moment would come. "You want to make this a regular thing?" "I want to make sure it never has to be a regular thing," Webb corrected. "We've proved it can be done. We've shown that cooperation between species can overcome threats that individual civilizations can't handle, but we need to be ready for whatever else is out there." 3 months later, Captain Chen found herself standing in the same great hall where the Galactic Council had rejected humanity's proposal. But this time the hall was filled with representatives from the rescued civilizations, beings who had been declared dead, but had returned with stories that changed everything. High Counselor Zelthera called for attention. "We are here to discuss the formation of a new joint task force dedicated to addressing galactic-scale threats. The proposal comes from the human delegation, with support from all 17 rescued civilizations." Chen walked to the speaker's platform, but this time she wasn't alone. Fleet Commander Kethvar, Admiral Telnash, Thoughtweaver Silandra, and commanders from a dozen other species stood with her. "The Impossible Missions Division," Chen announced, "will be a joint task force designed to tackle threats that individual species cannot handle alone. We've proved that cooperation works. We've shown that the galaxy's most dangerous problems have solutions if we're willing to work together to find them." Prime Calculator. Hexnath raised a question. "What makes you think there will be more such threats?" Dr. Webb stepped forward when being in the galaxy.